curiosity is often described as having the desire to learn. It's also about making the effort to learn. Sometimes our expectations of what we should be learning can prevent us from getting curious about what we could be learning. That's why I describe curiosity as a practice, and it's harder to do than it looks.
Wow. Isn't it good to be a TEDx speaker? And isn't it good to do a wonderful TEDx talk? Hey, you're tuned to Diary of a Speaker, and I am your host, Anthony Morore. You've just seen, or even just heard, if you're only listening, to Julie Pham. Julie Pham is a speaker, and she does a lot of other things. And she's going to be here with us today to tell us about what she does, who she is, and then she's going to share with us about her experience on a TEDx talk. And I don't want to take one more minute because I know that Julie has a lot to share with us. So, Dr. Julie Pham, let's go and meet her. Here she comes. Hi, Doctor.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yes, welcome to the Diary of a Speaker. We are glad that you're here with us today.
Yes, I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, let us start by knowing who exactly is Dr. Julie Pham, because I just introduced you as a speaker, but then maybe there are some other things that you'd like us to know about yourself.
Well, just a really important part of my identity. I am a Vietnamese boat person, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. My parents started the first privately owned Vietnamese newspaper in the Pacific Northwest. So that's important because I grew up. My parents were hustlers among hustlers. So entrepreneurship is really important in my world. So even though my background is I'm a historian, and then I worked at the newspaper, and then I spent 9 years in tech. I started my own company 3.5 years ago in the middle of the pandemic, and speaking became one of the offerings. And so I never thought I would actually be a paid speaker, and yet it just came with part of the business.
Okay, did you say that you started it in the middle of the pandemic?
I did.
Yeah, because we experience a lot of things in our own life, and some of the negative things that come, we may think that they are all bad, but then we find great things blooming out of something bad, something like a like the pandemic that was. And we are glad that you've come this far, and you grew from the pandemic and you are shining.
Yes. And Anthony, I got to tell you, I actually left a job I loved. And the only
Which
reason I
was
would leave a job I loved was so that I could start my own company. And it was because I felt called. I think of it as a calling. I felt called to start my own company.
so did the pandemic take you out of it, or you how what was the
I mean,
sequence?
I chose to leave my job. I chose to leave my job because I felt called to start this company, and it was just the best decision I ever made.
Okay, that's good. So we started the show by seeing you talk on a TEDx show. Where was that? I saw it's November 2023. And where exactly was that?
That was in Kirkland, Washington, so that's a suburb outside of Seattle.
And before that, I know you had spoken on several stages because you told us your business includes speaking, and which could be the places that you've spoken at before.
Oh, I've spoken at conferences. My first big paid keynote was actually an association of pharmacists. So I've spoken at companies like at Google, at Wifley, at Site Improve, and I've also spoken at just on Tuesday, actually, I spoke at the Greater Good Conference, which was nonprofits. So lots of different types of stages.
And that's good. And you mentioned your very first speech, and you kind of laughed there. And we are always looking forward to hearing some stories of first time speaking on stage. Can you maybe share with us that first experience?
Oh my gosh. I think my first time speaking on stage was, hmm, okay, there's the first time public speaking, and then there's the first time speaking on the stage. I did debate in high school.
Okay.
So I think
Like
I probably
like some of us, yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
I started in high school. And I gotta tell you that even though I'm a speaker, actually I'm a writer first.
Oh.
And I think of speaking as just one way to convey my ideas. And what I like
Mm-hmm.
about speaking is it helps me be a better writer because
Okay.
it forces me to communicate my thoughts in a way that people can hold in their minds as they're listening. And
Mm-hmm.
yet at heart, Anthony, I'm a writer. And
Oh,
so I just find speaking as a way to communicate my writing.
that's good.
Mhm.
And what have you written? Maybe we are curious
Oh,
also to
yes.
know
Yes.
how what our speakers have
So
written.
a lot of my speeches are actually about the 7 forms of respect. So I wrote this book about how we all can agree how respect feels, to feel
Mm-hmm.
seen, heard, acknowledged, appreciated. We disagree about what does it look like. What does it
Mm-hmm.
look like? So for some people, it looks like including you on all the emails. And other people don't clog up my email box if I don't need to do something.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it means doing things the way that I asked you to do it. And other people just no, as long as you get the job done, it doesn't matter. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so and yet those little differences in how we think about respect can become big conflicts. And so
Mm.
I actually talk a lot about that. And also another thing that has influenced my speaking, Anthony, is the fact that I do a lot of workshops. And so
Oh.
when I speak, my speeches are actually much more interactive than a lot of other speakers. And that's partly because I'm thinking about how I want people to feel. I'm thinking about how I want them to leave my talk, and I want them to feel connected, and I want them to feel, wow, I'm thinking of all these new things. And I find that's pretty if I'm given an hour to give a keynote, I don't wanna talk for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Really long. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that TEDx talk that I gave, that was 15 minutes. That's a pretty long talk for me to
It
go
felt like
straight.
eternity, I guess.
And, to memorize that too, because I also really believe that whenever I give a talk, it's gotta be memorized.
Yeah, is
Mhm,
important. Is
mhm,
important. Uh, and there are different ways of approach, and people apply different tactics, tips, and ideas they have about going about it. But even before we go deeper into that, giving a successful TEDx talk, you mentioned about debating in high school.
mhm.
And out of high school, what was your first? And if you can remember that.
Oh, my first I think it was in hmm, gosh, what was my very because there's emceeing and then there's giving a speech. Because I
Yes,
did a
and
lot of
those are two
emceeing
different
actually
things.
before I gave my own speeches. Does that count,
Okay.
Anthony?
Um, Maybe you can, yeah, give us all that we can give us the interesting one, the most interesting.
Okay, well, actually, I'll say one that was pretty memorable for me.
Okay.
My first memorable speech, how about that?
Yeah.
My first memorable speech was, it was an Ignite talk. Have you heard of that style? It's 15 slides, 15 seconds each, and so it's 5 minutes, and it just goes on autoplay,
I
and so
haven't
you
heard
have
about that.
and there's the Pacha-Cha, which is 20 slides at 20 seconds, and it goes on autoplay. And
Oh.
so my first real meaningful talk
Mm-hmm.
was an Ignite talk. And I think I was maybe 30 years old at the time. So this was about probably 15, 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me to give a talk, and I was just okay. And it was an Ignite style talk. And what I really like about that format is it forced me to be so clear about what I was gonna say because the slides were on autoplay,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no way that I could just lean on the slides for words. The slides had to have these visuals that would be evoking the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So, and Anthony, I'll say that I remember the first speech that I wanted to give that I didn't get to give, that I
Which was
really
that?
wanted to give,
Which
and
was
that
that?
was when I was an undergrad, and I really wanted to give the commencement speech
Oh,
for my I really and so they had these auditions, and so I wrote out my speech. This was for the history department at Berkeley, and I didn't get it, but you know what I did, Anthony?
what?
I took that speech because I was like, "This is a good speech." And this is back when they had fax machines, all
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I faxed my speech to the San Francisco Chronicle,
Okay.
and I said, "Can this be an op-ed?" And they published it as an op-ed from a graduate that year.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so I think that what I've learned a lot in speaking is you have to just keep trying, right? I mean, my TEDx, I I got rejected 5 times before I found one that would accept me.
Mm.
And so I think a lot of times people think, "Oh, you just get chosen." It's like, "No, you gotta keep going for it." And then actually another really memorable speech for me was I actually got invited to give the commencement speech for the Department of Asian Studies at the University of Oregon.
Yay!
Yes, and so that was, I think that was I was in my early 30s. It's like, "Wow, I am coming back as the paid commencement speaker."
Wow.
And that when I gave the speech, it was it was, even the photographer,
Mm-hmm.
he came up to me, he said, "I gotta tell you, I see a lot of speeches." He was the graduation photographer, and that
Mm-hmm.
was one
Mm-hmm.
of the best speeches I ever heard.
Wow.
So and then there's also the speeches like giving a speech at my friends' weddings, things like that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's still a
Yeah.
speech, right? And so and
Mm-hmm.
I really my philosophy about speaking is I'm serving the audience.
Yeah.
So this is actually not about me, this is about them. And so I really think about how am I gonna entertain them? How am I gonna educate them? How am I gonna engage them? How am I gonna move them?
Wow. And maybe that's just a part of the tips and ideas. That's what I'm thinking.
Mm.
And talking about giving a successful TEDx talk. And before we even get on stage, you said that you got rejected like 5 times.
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
what's the process like of landing a TEDx speech?
So the first it was in TEDx Seattle, and so that's the big TEDx in the Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first time, what they do is they have a team of recruiters, and so they invited me to submit, and then that was 2019, the first time I tried, and then they rejected my talk. And I kind of feel like, yeah, I wasn't ready. I didn't have that idea worth spreading yet. And then in 2022, they invited me to submit again. And this time, Anthony, I submitted 3 ideas. I was like, all of these ideas are things I could give a
Yeah.
talk on.
Mm-hmm.
And they even this it was such a rigorous process. I actually had to write a 8, 9-minute speech. I didn't have to memorize it at that point, and I had to audition. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were really close. And then they told me, "Hey, the funding got canceled, so we're going to have to postpone
Mm.
until next year." And I said, "I can't wait. I want to give my TEDx. I have an idea that I want to share with the world." And so
Mm-hmm.
then what I started doing was I started looking into TEDx's in other cities. So I applied to 3 in California. I got rejected by all of them. It's really hard to get accepted when you're outside of the area. They usually only leave maybe 1 or 2 spots for that,
Okay.
and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times they're actually inviting people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanna say I got rejected 4 and a half times, right? The one there was they stopped the funding, so that didn't quite. And so
Okay.
then my friend was accepted into this TEDx. It was TEDx Bellevue Women. And so she recommended me. And I remember meeting with the organizer and I said, "Hey, I've got these ideas." And she said, "Curiosity sounds really interesting, the way you're describing curiosity."
Mm-hmm.
And then I met with the curator, and the theme was called Lift. And the curator was just, "I don't know if your talk fits."
Mm.
And because the other thing was the talk, they were talking about advocacy, and a lot of the other talks were the speakers had gone through something tragic. One had
Okay.
lost their mother, one had lost their son, one had suicidal thoughts. And I really pushed back and I said, "I think you need just an average person story." Because you
Mm-hmm.
know how sometimes you're sitting in the audience and you hear this really shocking story and it's just, "Well, what am I complaining about? My
Yeah.
world's
Yeah.
not that bad." And so I
Mm-hmm.
really pushed and I said, "No, I think just an average person with this idea that I think can apply to a lot of people, can be relatable to a lot of people." And I
Mm-hmm.
also said, because she was just, "Well, maybe next year." And I said, "It is really important for me to do it this year. So let me know what I need to do, but it is important for me to get in this year. And this, Anthony, this was in the summer, and so this was about 3 months away. And all the other speakers had been chosen for months
Mm-hmm.
already.
Wow.
And they came back and they said, okay, you're going to speak and you're going to be the opening speaker. So you're going to open this up.
Opening speech. How did that feel for you?
It was just, okay, this is, I was really happy because I think being the first speaker, that means I get to chill and listen to everyone else and not be nervous.
Yeah,
So kind of just from it was just, wow, it was an honor to get chosen to be the opening because that sets the tone
that's the
for the
tone
rest. It sets
of
the
the
tone.
event. Yeah.
So I just want to share with your listeners, don't be discouraged if you don't get chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes it's just maybe that your idea isn't ready or it's not refined enough. That's what happened to me in 2018. And
Mm.
there can be all these different reasons. So don't think, oh, if I didn't get chosen, that means that I'm not gonna give a talk. It just means not right now.
Yeah, and then someone told me that just that's what no means. No, next
Mhm.
opportunity.
Oh, I love that. I haven't heard that yet. Thank you for sharing
So when
that.
you're rejected for the first time, look for the next one. Like when you were rejected to give a commencement speech, you still went on to want to give it somewhere, and then eventually you still gave a commencement speech somewhere.
Mhm,
So the thing is to stay focused, to keep on pushing, keep on presenting, keep on practicing your speech
mhm.
to get better and better.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now we'd want more tips and ideas about just getting there in the on the TEDx speech and or that stage and giving that speech that leaves the audience awed.
Mhm.
Tell us.
So I gotta tell you, I am really into feedback. I had 70 people review my talk.
Mm,
Okay. I am like, and I'm like, that's the way I am as a writer too. That's
yeah.
the way I am as a thinker. I want feedback. And the nice thing is when you get that much feedback from people, that means there's no way you can make everyone happy. So that
Of
forces me
course.
to be clear about what is my idea? What
Mm-hmm.
do I want to do? Because there are going to be some people, too many stories, not enough stories, longer pauses, And so the way that I did this was because one of the other reasons why I really wanted to do a TEDx talk because I knew it would be transformational for me in terms of refining my ideas.
Yeah.
So TEDx Seattle is really well known for having great coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And typically with the different TEDx programs, good ones will give you a coach. And so what happened with TEDx Seattle was when they said, "Hey," the executive producer said, "Hey, we're we're not putting one on, but if you get into another one, I'll help you." And he meant that.
Mm,
He meant that. He gave me
mm.
7 90-minute one-on-one sessions.
Wow.
It was even better than because I would know I wouldn't have gotten that kind of attention if I
Mm-hmm.
had just gone through TEDx Seattle, right? But he didn't have a show to give, right?
Mm.
So it was me. I got
Okay.
so, and so I think that a my process, I'll say, because I started as a writer, is me writing the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then that process of that is constantly refining. So what I did was I was very lucky. Sorry, I was very lucky because I got a coach from TEDx Seattle who said, I'll
Mm-hmm.
help you and then I also got a coach from TEDx Bellevue Women.
Wow.
And then I also had another friend who offered to coach me. And these three people were really different. So the one from TEDx Seattle, he was so good at content. He really pushed me. He's like, "What are you saying? What is this?" And every time we would go through 90 minutes and he would all of the ideas because he was like, "You've got to make it so sharp."
Mm-hmm.
And then I had another friend who coached me on my movement and on my body because in the talk, how I moved in certain ways,
Yes.
right? And she broke me. After I just had a 90-minute session, 1 90-minute session with her, and she was just the way that you were moving. I didn't know that. So, for example, I tend to move a lot when I talk. I tend to
Mm-hmm.
walk around a lot when I talk, and she was just, no, you have to stand in place And even the stance, she was like, the way that the width of your legs, every little thing. And so right after that, for a week after that, I had to unlearn these habits. So I looked really stiff, right? Because I was having to reprogram my brain. And yet once I learned it, I never stopped. It was just like I now move my body differently when I talk. She was like, look at 3 points. And that was transformational. And then I had another one who was just really good at kind of general. She was the generalist. And so that was one, just having different coaches. And then the other was I brought people along my journey because I know a lot of people dream of doing a TEDx talk or they watch TEDx talks and they're, how does this happen? So I I created 4 public viewing sessions, practice sessions. And I said, I'm going to do this on Zoom and I'm going to invite people to just sign up and watch me and give me feedback. And it's just going to be half an hour. And so I literally created an Eventbrite where they could just sign up. And then I created a survey. And at the end, what I'd do is I'd give the talk and then I would launch this survey and I would ask very specific questions. And the survey changed because this was over a 4-week period. My talk
Okay.
kept evolving. So I had different questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped me too.
Wow.
And so in each of the sessions there could be from 3 people to like 15 people. And also during this time, anytime I talked to a friend or she was like, hey, can I practice with you? Can I read this to you? And so it was so interesting getting different feedback. And Anthony, there's a lot of positive feedback. The times where I really changed though were the ones that I had some people who were just even 2 weekends before my talk were just, I don't know what you're talking about. This doesn't make sense to me. I had one person who's just, this does not make sense. And I think you should do this, this, and this. And she gave me 3 pieces of advice. I took the first 2, but the last one, I was like, I'm not going to take that because she wanted me to quote from someone else on Curiosity. It's like, quote Ben Franklin. I'm like, I don't need to quote Ben Franklin. These are my ideas. And so this is what I mean by there's a lot of feedback that you can take. And there's the feedback that's like, thank you. I'm not going to take that because of this. I want to actually share my ideas. And I don't think
Wow.
I need to quote from Ben Franklin.
Now, from your experience, it's like preparing for a TEDx talk is quite a lot of work. Is this the path that you chose? What's the requirement actually once you've been given the stage? You
Anthony, I went overboard. Or I shouldn't say
went
overboard,
over.
but this is the way that I did it. Most people did not want this. There was even so for me, memorizing the talk was really important. They have
Mm-hmm.
confidence monitors. So there are people who were reading their talk on the ground.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
But for me, I just knew I could not do that. I had to memorize it. I had to feel it. And so everyone makes their own choice, right? Because there are people, I mean, I put in a lot of work. And there was a point where I think about 2/3 of the way through, I was fed up with my talk. I was so exhausted. And my
Mm-hmm.
coach, who I'd been away from for a few weeks, he came back and he's like, you're taking too many people input. This is too much. And I had to go that weekend. I remember I have to really break this. And I had to do like another major rewrite. So for me, the process of the talk wasn't just about the talk. I wanted to go through this transformation to find the core of what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I put so much work into it. Now, for people who are I just want to give a talk and I have this idea. And so most people are actually not going to put in nearly as much work as I did. But that's
Mm-hmm.
because I saw this as a forcing function, as this opportunity for me to make my ideas so clear. And now, I mean, now I've actually even created a workshop from it. And we even use the images because those even the images, the illustrations
Yeah.
in the talk,
Mm-hmm.
right, really play with that. Um and that was also it was I think a lot of people really enjoyed being part of the process and getting to see the behind the scenes part. I think that's something that people don't realize
Yeah.
is they think, oh, I just want to surprise the audience. Like I want to do a good job in front of the audience, which means I better be practicing a lot before I get on that stage.
Yeah. So that and you get the feedback that you're talking about is very good before your actual speech because Some of the things that you may be thinking are very bright are very you would be
Mhm.
surprised to just turn there on the stage and get a very negative feedback, so avoid
Well, I will say, and it's so interesting getting feedback from so many different people. They notice little things. Like, so for
Yes.
example, in my talk, I refer to someone called K, and then originally it was called M, and then someone said, "Can you use a name because it feels like this initial?" And it makes me think about. I think it'd be easier if you had a name.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want a name because I think that then names can have connotations for people. What I did was I chose an initial that could be a name.
Okay.
K could be a name.
Yes, it could
Some
be.
people are going to hear
There's
it
a
as a
name.
name.
Yeah.
Some people are going to hear it as an initial. And
Uh-huh.
so even that little feedback helped me because different people notice different things.
Yes, yes. Different people notice different things.
Mhm.
Um, so preparation, feedback, practice. Uh, Tell us something else that is very, very important, because I mean, I think we are running out of time. But
Mhm.
before you leave us, we would like to hear one of the most important things that you would tell us not to miss preparing for a TEDx talk.
Mm, know, be clear about what you want. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think that the next thing I want to share is how you manage your expectations after the TEDx talk. All
Mm-hmm.
right, because I think a lot of people think about how do I get on my talk, and then afterwards, I think of this as a tool. My talk
Yes.
didn't go viral. It didn't, it's and just managing your expectations. The other thing that I learned was a lot of people, all these agencies are like, "Hey, we can get 1 million views on your talk if you pay us this much." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't realize that," and I found out that's actually how some people get views. And so for me, I was just, I'm okay with whatever number of views I have because I know
Mm-hmm.
those are real views, right? And so, and I still got, I mean, I was a paid keynote at Google because someone saw my TEDx talk that they found on the internet, right?
Wow.
And so
Wow.
sometimes it's not like you don't need to have like 100,000 views for it
Yes.
to have impact.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Sure.
my talk was translated into Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't expect that, even
Mm-hmm.
though I don't like relatively have that many views. So I just think managing expectations and
Managing.
being okay with like, you know what, reminding myself, why did I do this? It's because I had a message I want to share with the world, and it doesn't, not to get caught up in the vanity metrics of views. That's the tip I want to give to your
And that's very good. And because as I've had people talk about getting on the TEDx stage, uh, they most of them are looking for that part that you mentioned, that something came out of it. And it's good to hear that even without thousands and hundreds of thousands of views, you still got a keynote speech
Mhm,
out of that.
mhm,
And it's not many years in, so I want to believe that even in the future there's something that is going to come from that. Just someone finding your talk
mhm.
on
Yes.
YouTube and watching it and reaching out to you.
Mhm.
And I wish you much success. I wish you great impact as you're going to make some impact on people. I just wish that there's going to be that transformation in the people who are going to listen to that as you keep
Yes.
on going.
And that's the goal, right? That if
Mhm.
I can share my message and some people are changed because of that, that's why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it so that I can get all these views because that's something I can't control.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, you can control. So, to everybody or anybody who's out there and you're thinking of getting on a TEDx stage, you've heard the story from Dr. Julie. It's possible for you. Don't give up on it. Going after it, asking for that opportunity, and once you get it, also prepare as much as you can for an impactful speech. This is what I've gotten from Dr. Julie today, and I'm thankful to you, Julie, for coming to our show this day.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yes, we are almost coming to the end of the show, and I know once we are out of this place, some people would be interested to reaching out to you. How do they do that?
The best place is to reach me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also go to julie at curiositybase.com. That's my email address. I'd be happy to hear from you. And I have also on my YouTube channel, I have a video on 10 tips on giving a TEDx talk as well.
Okay, 10 tips on giving a TEDx talk. That's why you should follow up with Julie to go and listen to the rest of what we may not have heard in this episode. Yes, you mentioned about going the website. That's the email address, and
Yes.
the website is www.curiositybase.com. Oh, it's .com. Sorry for that. .com. It's just .com to you.
Just one.com.
Just .com. And actually, that link is in the comments in the description of the video. So reach out to Julie, and yes, please also remember to subscribe to this podcast on www.diaryoverspeaker.com and give us feedback. Yes, feedback is important. We all love feedback. Give Julie feedback, give us feedback, and we appreciate. So that's just about it. Thank you, Julie. And yeah, as we are signing out, let's hear you once again on stage. And bye for now, Julie. Bye.
Curiosity is often described as having the desire to learn. It's also about making the effort to learn. Sometimes our expectations of what we should be learning can prevent us from